Welcome back to U.S. History. Today, we're learning about Chapter 10. Let's get into it. All right, so Chapter 10 is called A Changing Nation, and we're going to start off with what historians called an era of good feelings. All right. Then we're going to learn a new court case called McCulloch v. Maryland. All right, this is our second court case that we've learned about. We'll talk about Spain, Canada, Mexico is going to declare independence, and then we're going to have a new doctrine called the Monroe Doctrine, and we'll kind of compare and contrast that with Washington's farewell address. Very good. So let's get started. What is the era of good feelings? It's just a feeling of national unity, okay? We've been through some things. We were in this War of 1812, and now we're coming out, and people feel good and proud to be American, all right? What's McCulloch versus Maryland? We've got a problem with federalism. Who's in charge? An issue looms large. Who's in charge? Is it the states, or is it the national government? Who's got the final say? We don't really know, but this court case is going to help to try to shape that argument. And then what was the importance of the Monroe Doctrine? It has international implications. All right. So Marbury versus Madison. Why is that important? Exactly. It establishes the principle of judicial review, which means you can declare a law unconstitutional. Why do we want the Louisiana Purchase originally? We just want the port city or the area around New Orleans. We want to make sure we can get our crops to market, and then we end up buying the whole thing. But what was Jefferson's dilemma? Yeah, he didn't think it was constitutional. Who explores the region? Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea. All right, cool. Let's go. Okay, new economy. This is important. We'll just talk about this in a minute. The North, are they going to support tariffs? First off, what's a tariff? Tax on imports. All right, so you have North, South, West. Let's talk about the North. They supported the tariffs. Why? Okay, the tariffs will make British imports more expensive. So let's say we're making a hat and it's $5, and England's making a hat and it's $4, and we slap a $2 tariff on it. Now our hat's $5, their hat's $6, okay? So the North wants the tariff because it protects the northern factories and the northern industry, all right? Now the South, they don't want the tariff. Why? Because now it makes hats more expensive. They're just consumers of these products. Before you had a choice between a $4 and a $5 hat. Now you got a choice between a $5 and a $6 hat. So they oppose the tariffs. They don't want to pay more. And then in the West, you want roads and canals because that will increase trade. But who's going to make these roads and canals? Let's talk about this stuff, okay? Real quick, we've been talking about some bubbles. The water's hot, bloop, bloop, little bubbles. This is another bubble, bloop, 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 bloop. Okay, the North wants the tariff. The South doesn't want the tariff. The North has different economic goals than the South. Does this make sense? All right. Just want to throw that out there. Okay. Check this out. Republican beliefs. The Republicans want these roads and these canals. Here's the thing. The Jeffersonian Republicans, they believe in small government. Okay, they believe in hands-off. But what if the government just did one time? What if they built these roads? Okay, what if they just invested initially in this infrastructure and then got out of the way? And these roads create trade. And we know that with trade, you get more wealth, right? So this is a little bit different. Should we promote or even demand federal spending and programs to stimulate the economy? This slide was made 2 or 3 years ago, and right now, while we're in the middle of this COVID crisis, this slide is perfectly placed. Do we want the federal government to spend money to stimulate the economy? Now, if you say yes, there's advantages to that. You'll have money flowing, people that are out of work can get jobs, or the businesses can stay afloat. I'm going back to the original, and what they wanted was roads, okay? So let's say we improve all of our roads, or we build a new system for moving products around, better train tracks, etc. Okay, you invest and then you expect to get a return. But what's the downside of that? If you all this federal spending, well, that's going to create more debt and more inflation, and eventually you're going to have more taxes because you can't spend money without getting that money back. So someone's going to have to pay for this stuff. Okay, I'm not trying to say spending good, spending bad, promote, I'm just trying to show you that, one, we went from the government should spend no money to now we're thinking the government should spend a little in investment. And then two, that's a modern day issue. What level of investment should the government spend? And there's no magical answer. I just want you to see that some of these issues, they don't go away. That's why, they say history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. We could be in a little bit of that rhyme right now. All right, the bank ends. And so now we got U.S. Bank 2, all right? And the real thing was the state banks weren't acting as wise as the national bank, okay? What's this movie called? Who's gonna pay for that war? Okay, it's back. You had the War of 1812 and you've had some other wars, and now you have to have some money. We have the tariff of 1816. Okay, let's go over this term dumping. This is an economic term, and it means selling below market price. So let's say it cost, Sony and Microsoft each have their PlayStation and Xbox, and it probably cost them more than $500. But let's pretend it cost them $500. They're selling it to you for $500. But Microsoft says, you know what? We really want to get a lot of Xbox customers. We're going to sell it for $50. What? Everybody runs out and buys an Xbox. Okay, this is an example of dumping. You sell below the market price. You put PlayStation out of business, okay? And then, after there is no PlayStation and Xbox is the only console in the land, Microsoft goes, it's now $800. Got you, because you have no choice, okay? And so right here, look at this. The EU is imposing a triple-digit anti-dumping duty on Chinese bikes. So they're accusing China of selling these bikes so cheap that they're going to run out all the competition, and then China can then raise the price to whatever they want. That's the term economic dumping. Okay. So there's a tariff debate about North and South. We talked about it. What's a tariff? Watch this video.
But first, as we touched on earlier, there is a trade dispute brewing between the U.S. and its northern neighbor. William Brangham is back with that story.
President Trump's decision to slap tariffs on certain lumber imported from Canada escalated tensions between the two nations. And the president has already said he wants to renegotiate or overhaul NAFTA this summer. Today's move drew a pointed response from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who said, "You cannot thicken this border without hurting people on both sides of it." At a meeting with farmers this afternoon, President Trump came back with some tough words of his own.
People don't realize Canada's been very rough on the United States. Everyone thinks of Canada as being wonderful, and so do I. I love Canada. But they've outsmarted our politicians for many years, and you people understand that. So we did institute a very big tariff.
Do you fear a trade war with Canada?
No, not at all.
Why not?
They have a tremendous surplus with the United States. Whenever they have a surplus, I have no fear.
So let's get some further explanation about this move and what it means for the broader trade agenda of the new president. Greg Ip covers all of this for the Wall Street Journal, and he joins me now. Welcome back to the NewsHour.
Thank you.
So who would have thought that we would have our first trade flare-up of the Trump administration with Canada, of all places? Explain, what is this fight all about?
It does sound like a surprise, but it shouldn't be surprising. And remember, the Canada-U.S. trade relationship is still the world's largest, and in a relationship that size always generates disputes. And this particular dispute did not fall out of a clear spring sky. It's been going on for literally decades. It's rooted in the different way Canada and the United States charges forestry companies for the trees that they cut down and turn into lumber. In the United States, they have a market-based system. There's an auction. Companies compete against each other to buy the trees. In Canada, the provincial governments basically assign a fee that turns out to be lower than the market price American companies pay. The United States claims that's an unfair subsidy. And so this has been an ongoing source of dispute between the two countries. The dispute.
All right, welcome back. McCulloch versus Maryland, I think it's going to be attached to this video, but let's go over the court case. Maryland says we're going to tax the bank. can the state tax a national bank? We don't really know until we have this court case. Look at this real quick. This is that battle. At this time, the states sort of have the rights, or the last say. It's the battle of federalism. Who's got the last say? Who's got the most power? Well, with McCulloch versus Maryland, the arrows are going to switch to those arrows. McCulloch versus Maryland says national government trumps state government. National laws trump state laws. Please know that, okay? That's what the court case is about. Write that down. McCulloch versus Maryland, federal government has the final say. Now, this is what the Civil War is going to be about, this little dance of the arrows. The issue will be slavery, but the issue is, does the national government or do the state governments get to decide the issue of slavery? Okay, this federalism doesn't get decided until we get into the Civil War. But I want you to see that the debate is heating up. The Civil War didn't come out of nowhere. This debate is going on. All right, Andrew Jackson, okay? He's sent to recapture slaves in Florida. This is part of the Seminole War. This is an expansion. How does Florida become part of the U.S. when Florida was belonged to Spain? Here it is, okay? He rolls down in there. He wasn't even told to go into Florida and capture this stuff, but he goes down and captures a couple of towns and just shows Spain that they can't hold it, that we've got too much power. We can come in there. At this time, Haiti and the United States are the only two places not controlled by Europe, okay? So most of the land around is still controlled by Europe. Until Mexico breaks free and declares their independence in 1821, all right? They're first ruled by a monarchy, then they revolt and they get a constitution. Here's a quick video.
There is nothing like being free and having the right to do what you want. There is nothing like cutting loose, enjoying just whatever you want to do, and being free. But in history, not everyone could do that. And right now, I want to talk to you about a holiday that's celebrated for freedom and independence. Have you ever heard of Mexican Independence Day? Well, it's a holiday celebrated each year in Mexico. It's a holiday that celebrates the independence of Mexico as they broke free from Spanish rule. This holiday is big because not only is it celebrated in Mexico, but Mexican Independence Day is celebrated by Mexicans around the world. Each year on September 16th, parades, reenactments, and other celebrations take place in major cities like Houston, Texas, Los Angeles, and more. Spain originally ruled Mexico in 1500. After Spain conquered the region, they renamed it New Spain, and many of the Mayas and Aztecs who lived there were forced into slavery. As time went on, Spaniards weren't nice, and they made Mexicans angry. This made the Mexicans want to change, and Mexican Independence Day began from this with Mexicans who were standing up to the Spanish. Now, many say the man who helped to lead the revolt was a man by the name of Father Hidalgo. He is considered by many to be the father of the nation. On September 15th, Father Hidalgo, who had been planning a revolt against the Spanish government, found out that the Spanish wanted to arrest him. Knowing they would arrest him, he went to the people of Mexico and got them fired up with a speech called the Grito de Dolores, and told the people, Viva Mexico and Viva la Independencia. After the fight for independence started and the Mexicans went to war against the Spanish, it was on from there. Father Hidalgo had around 90,000 farmers with him that did not have a lot of money. He also had the help of Mexican civilians that believed in him to fight the Spanish. After the Mexicans began to fight for their freedom, that made Spain really mad. They eventually caught Father Hidalgo and killed him, thinking this would stop the revolt. But the Mexicans kept fighting on for 11 years, and they gained their independence in 1821.
Okay, welcome back. This will definitely be attached. This is the Monroe Doctrine. Please read it. And let's pause, let's read. All right, welcome back. What's the Monroe Doctrine? What does it say? It basically says, we'll stay out of Europe, but we want Europe to stay out of the Americas. This is a little bit different than what George Washington said. George Washington said, stay out of all foreign entanglements. Now we're basically saying, you stay out of our business, we'll stay out of your business, okay? So it's just a little bit different. We're trying to flex our muscles over here in North and South America and say, stay out of our business, okay? Don't go into Mexico and try to recolonize it and things of that nature, okay? Any action in the Americas would be considered hostile. All right. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little more about Andrew Jackson. We're going to talk a little bit about suffrage, and then we'll talk about Indian removal and the Trail of Tears and finish up with the nullification crisis. Let's get going. What does suffrage mean? The right to vote. What does women's suffrage mean? Women's right to vote. But that's not what we're really talking about right now. We're talking about men getting the right to vote, but men who don't own land. So the story of voting in America is you had to own land, and then finally they don't have to own land, and then African Americans get the right to vote, and then the women get the right to vote. And so it doesn't start off with everybody getting the right to vote. We're moving from one place to, from a place of limited freedom to more freedom, democracy for all. And so you can look at that in two ways, and you can say, America's bad, look at what they used to do, and look at all these laws that had to get changed. Or you can say, look, America wasn't perfect and it's getting better all the time. However you want to view it, that's your business. But we start off with a limited group being able to vote, and that limited group has expanded throughout the years to where we are today. And you can make an argument that even today, with different laws and whatnot, that and even being able to vote online or something like that, or through the mail, that voting's expanding even further today. And that's fine. I want you to see that that's the way it is. Okay. The election of 1824, Jackson wins the popular vote. Jackson has the most electoral votes. So who becomes president? Adams. Exactly. You're like, what? Hey, look, just because you have the most electoral votes doesn't mean you're president. You have to have a majority of electoral votes. And if you don't get a majority, it goes into the House. And then they can do whatever they want. So he gets, look, these are the people go, this election's like no other and all this and that. Look, history says that our elections have been complicated and mixed up since the beginning, okay? So you got the popular vote and the electoral vote, but you didn't get the majority of the electoral vote, so you don't get to be president. Isn't that interesting? All right. So, say hello to the Whig Party, okay? And they're basically the anti-Jackson party, and now we've got Whigs versus Democrats. All right. I want to mention spoils system. To the victor goes the spoils. The spoils system is you support a particular candidate, and then when they get elected, they give jobs to all the people that supported them and all their friends, okay? So just know that. It says to be continued, and it will be continued, but not for a while. The Cherokee Nation, they try to adapt. They try to embrace. They try to conform to the American way of life, learning English and doing things, but they still don't get treated fairly in my estimation. Okay, so this is the Indian Removal Act. And this says that Native Americans can be removed, and this is going to be, okay, and they're going to be removed to Oklahoma, all right, modern day Oklahoma. And so, and it involves the Creek and the Cherokee, the Seminole, the Chippewa. And so you can see, this is what the Trail of Tears is all about. They're going to have to walk. You can see on this map, look at those places, and they have to walk to what is modern-day Oklahoma. Again, if you remember from the beginning of class, we talked about physical geography, human geography. If you are a Native American, if you're a Seminole, you know how to survive in Florida, hunt alligators, fish, and whatnot. When you move to Oklahoma, you might not have the same skills, and that's going to make you dependent upon things. Let's watch this video about the Trail of Tears.
For thousands of years, Native people had lived in North America. In the early 17th century, settlers from Europe came across a huge ocean to North America and made it their home. The natives watched the settlers as they struggled to live in this new land. But as more and more Europeans were coming across the ocean, the natives began to worry. European settlers built towns and villages and raised their families on farms, and they loved the new country they had made their home in. They loved it so much that some of them didn't want to share it with the native people who were already there. This was a real problem because the native people also loved their home. There are a lot of sad stories about this problem, and one of them is called the Trail of Tears. This is the story of a group of Native Americans called the Cherokee that lived in the southeast part of what is now America. By the end of the 1700s, the Cherokee had already lost more than half their land to settlers. The European settlers had formed their own country called the United States, and most people in the United States at this time believed that the Cherokee should be moved far to the west to make room for more people from the United States. Hoping to keep their land, many of the Cherokee people tried to adapt to the ways of their new neighbors. Many of them lived in log cabins, learned to use rifles, and worked with spinning wheels. But adapting to the customs of the American frontiers people was not enough. In the late 1820s, gold was discovered on Cherokee land, and this made the land very valuable to the people of the United States. At this time, Andrew Jackson was President of the United States, and he helped make laws that would allow people to move the Cherokee from their land. The laws took away the rights of the Cherokee people.
No Cherokee could mine gold on his own land. No Cherokee could testify in court against a white man. No Cherokee could carry weapons. The Cherokees were forbidden to meet in council.
For more than a decade, the Cherokee protested the laws. The Supreme Court even found them to be unconstitutional, but there was no way to enforce this decision. In the end, they had little choice but to sell their land to the United States government. They were given 2 years to move off their land. In 1839, 2 years later, time had run out for the Cherokee. The military was sent in to round them up and put them in stockades. There were almost 15,000 men, women, and children. This was too many people for the stockades, and there was not enough food and water for them. Nearly 1,500 died. Winter was closing in as soldiers began to lead the Cherokee off the land they loved. The land they had buried their relatives in for centuries. The land they had lived in and many had died for.
I read in stories that they ran up and they hugged the trees as they left. And every time I come back here, I look around and it's so beautiful here. You know that they grieved.
An Army general stood by with 7,000 soldiers as the Cherokee men, women, and children, carrying all that they owned, began an 850-mile march to what is now the state of Oklahoma. Along the way, about 4,000 died, mostly children and elderly. This was the tragic journey that is known as the Trail of Tears. Removing the native people from land that the United States wanted cost the Cherokee a lot of lives and every last acre of the Cherokee land.
Okay, welcome back. Last thing we're going to talk about today is the nullification crisis, all right? So, they add this tariff. The South doesn't want the tariff. Remember this from the beginning? Okay, they have to pay more. John C. Calhoun says the state can nullify the federal law. Can they? What court case says you can't do that? McCulloch versus Maryland, right? He says, the North says our union must be preserved. The union next to our liberty. South Carolina nullifies the tariff and threatens to secede. Jackson sends in federal troops. No other states rally around it, so they end up backing down. What I'm trying to say is you could have started the Civil War right here in some way, shape, or form, in some level, okay? This would have been the Civil War about a tariff, but it's really about who's got the final say, the states or the federal government. That's what's happening at this nullification crisis. So the bubbles are bubbling, okay? The water's getting hot. Hope you enjoyed this lesson. Don't forget to take the quiz on Wednesday, and we'll see you next time.